What if the story of America didn't start with Columbus, but with a man who stepped off a boat 4,000 years ago, carrying the blueprints for every nation on Earth? We're taught that human history in the Americas begins around 15,000 years ago. Ice bridges, nomadic hunters, slow migration from Asia into Alaska, then southward across 2 continents. It's a neat story. Logical, scientific. But there's another version. One that's older than any textbook. One that millions of people around the world hold as sacred truth. According to the Bible, every person alive today descended from just 3 men. 3 brothers. Sons of a man named Noah. And if that's true, then the question isn't just how people arrived in the Americas. It's which brother's children made the journey. This is a story you won't hear in school. Not because it's been disproven, but because it asks a question most historians refuse to touch. Where did Americans really come from, according to the Bible? Let's go back. Way back. Genesis chapter 6. The world is drowning. A flood sent to wipe away corruption and violence. Only 8 people survive. Noah, his wife, his 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and their wives. When the waters recede, God gives them a single command. Be fruitful and multiply. Fill the earth. Not just live on the earth. Fill it. Every corner. Every coastline. Every mountain and valley. According to Genesis chapter 10, what scholars call the Table of Nations, the descendants of these 3 men spread out and became the founders of every people group on the planet. Shem's line moved east and south. His descendants are traditionally linked to the Middle East, parts of Asia, and the Semitic peoples. Ham's children settled in Africa and parts of the ancient Near East. Canaan, Egypt, and Ethiopia traced their roots to him. But Japheth went north and west. His descendants are believed to have populated Europe, the distant islands, and the far reaches of the known world. Genesis 10 verse 5 says this, "From these the coastlands of the nations were separated into their lands, everyone according to his language, according to their families, into their nations." Coastlands, distant shores, far nations. The Bible doesn't say Japheth stopped at Greece or Scandinavia. It says his children filled the coastlands. All of them. So here's the question no one wants to ask. How far did they really go? Japheth had 7 sons. Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshech, Tiras. These aren't just names. In ancient Jewish, Christian, and Islamic tradition, these names represent entire peoples. Javan, for example, is often linked to the Greeks. Magog to the peoples of the far north, possibly Scythians or early Russians. Gomer to the Sumerians, who eventually became the Celts and Germanic tribes. Medieval scholars believe that all of Europe descended from Japheth's line. The Anglo-Saxons, the Vikings, the Gauls, the Slavs. But here's where it gets interesting. If Japheth's descendants became the seafaring peoples of the ancient world, the Phoenicians, the Greeks, the Norse, then they didn't just settle along the Mediterranean. They explored. They migrated. They built ships that could cross oceans. Ancient boats were more advanced than we give them credit for. The Phoenicians circumnavigated Africa. Polynesians crossed the Pacific. The Norse reached North America 500 years before Columbus. So if the Bible says Japheth's children were commanded to fill the earth, and if they were seafarers, and if they had thousands of years to migrate, could they have reached the Americas? Not in 1492. Not even in 1000 AD. But long before that. When the world was young. When the memory of the flood was still fresh. When the earth was being divided. Let's talk about Babel. Genesis chapter 11. Humanity speaks one language. They build a tower. God scatters them, confuses their speech, forces them to spread out. This isn't just a story about pride. It's a story about dispersion. God deliberately broke humanity into fragments and sent them to the ends of the earth. Some went east. Some went west. Some crossed deserts. Others crossed seas. Now, conventional archaeology says the first humans reached the Americas via the Bering Strait around 15,000 years ago. Maybe earlier. But the biblical timeline is different. If the flood happened around 4,000 years ago, and if the dispersion at Babel happened a few centuries after that, then we're talking about a much more recent migration. Could people have crossed the Atlantic? The Pacific? Could they have island hopped? Followed coastlines? Drifted on currents? Some researchers say yes. Ancient inscriptions in North America. Stones carved with symbols that look Mediterranean. Hebrew-like letters in places like Los Lunas, New Mexico. Phoenician-style petroglyphs in Tennessee. Are they real? Are they hoaxes? The debate rages on. But what if they're clues? What if ancient Japhethite peoples, explorers, traders, wanderers, made it to the Americas long before recorded history? Not to conquer. Not to colonize. Just to move. To settle. To fulfill the command they were given at Ararat. Fill the earth. But here's where the conversation gets complicated. Because the Americas weren't empty when Europeans arrived. They were full of people, nations, languages, civilizations. The Aztecs, the Inca, the Cherokee, the Lakota, the Maya. Where do they fit in the biblical narrative? Some Bible believers say Native Americans are descendants of Japheth, that they arrived early, during the post-Babel migrations, and over thousands of years developed distinct cultures and languages. Others point to the Book of Mormon, which claims that ancient Israelites, descendants of Shem, sailed to the Americas around 600 BC and became the ancestors of native peoples. Still others believe that multiple migrations happened over time. Waves of people from different families, different continents, blending and diverging as the centuries passed. What's clear is this: the indigenous peoples of the Americas have been here for a very, very long time. Their oral histories speak of ancient origins, of long journeys, of creation stories tied to this land. A biblical framework doesn't erase that. It just offers a different lens. What if everyone, every people group, every tribe, every nation, came from the same starting point? What if diversity isn't a contradiction of the Genesis story, but the fulfillment of it? What if the very thing we see as evidence against a single origin is actually evidence for it? So why don't we hear this version in school? Why do most history classes start with ice bridges and evolution, not Noah and Japheth? Because faith and academia operate on different rules. Modern archaeology relies on physical evidence, carbon dating, fossils, DNA, peer-reviewed studies. The Bible relies on testimony, ancient witnesses, genealogies passed down through generations, texts preserved across millennia. Both claim to be true, but they don't always agree. And in a secular education system, faith-based history is seen as belief, not fact. Not because it's been definitively disproven, but because it can't be tested in a lab. That doesn't make it false. It just makes it unpopular. And that's why conversations like this one are so rare. Because to even ask the question, what does the Bible say about American origins, is to step outside the boundaries of acceptable discourse. But here's the thing. Millions of people around the world believe the Bible is historically accurate. Not metaphorically. Not symbolically. Literally. And for them, the question of where Americans came from isn't just academic. It's personal. It's spiritual. It's about identity, ancestry, and the very fabric of human history. So maybe the real question isn't whether the Bible is right. Maybe it's whether we're brave enough to explore what it says. Let's come back to where we started. 3 brothers. 3 families. One command: fill the earth. If you believe the Bible, then every human being alive today shares a common ancestor. We're all cousins, all connected by blood that flows back to a single boat on a single mountain. And somewhere along the way, some of those people crossed an ocean, or a land bridge, or a frozen strait, and they became the Americans, the indigenous, the settlers, the immigrants, all of us. Maybe they were descendants of Japheth. Maybe they were from Shem's line. Maybe multiple waves came at different times. Or maybe the whole thing is a story, a myth, a way ancient people tried to make sense of a big, confusing world. But here's what we know for sure. Humanity spread across deserts and seas, mountains and valleys, against impossible odds. And we ended up everywhere. The Bible says that was intentional, that we were meant to scatter, to diversify, to fill every corner of creation. So whether you believe in Noah or not, the outcome is the same. We're here, all of us, from every tribe, tongue, and nation. And that, in itself, is extraordinary. But I want to leave you with this. If the Bible is right, if we really all came from the same three brothers, if Japheth's children really sailed to distant coastlands, then what did they remember? What stories did they carry with them? What truths did they forget? And what if the indigenous peoples of the Americas have been telling the same story all along, just in a different language? What do you think? Could the Bible explain American origins, or is this history lost to time? Let us know below.